Welcome back, everyone, to the TCG Rundown. I'm Silver.
I'm Andrew.
And this is our second attempt at recording this video.
Wow, take that, editor.
No.
Jeez.
I'm not calling anyone out. Anyway, technically, it's the second part of our Into the Inklands Championship recap. I did a video all by my onesie last week.
You did.
Because, yeah.
I was busy. Okay.
So, week 2 of the Into the Inklands set championships for Lorcana is officially in the books. It is behind us. We had the privilege of playing in several tournaments.
Yes.
You were in 4. I played in 3, and I judged 1.
Mm-hmm.
Quite an experience. It was a very competitive field.
Yes. Very competitive.
I was surprised. Indiana, it turns out, has a very competitive Lorcana group.
Does, and it also has a lot of angle shooters, but I'm not going to get into that till later. just going to put that out there.
So let's talk a little bit. You played Ruby Amethyst in 2.
Yes, I did Ruby Amethyst in 2 of the events, the last 2 events. Mm-hmm. Then my first event I did Steel Song Lanterns, and then the second one was Emerald Amethyst.
And I ran Emerald Steel in 2 and Emerald Amethyst in my last one.
Yes.
Not a lot of luck with Emerald Steel for me. Might just have been my build, might have been my luck, but...
it's a hard deck to pilot. Depending on how you play it, it's a hard deck to pilot.
I didn't get many reps in with it before I played, so that was probably part of the problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, you came very close to top cut in all of them. You did make the top cut in one of them.
Yes.
Any particular match highlights?
So like the first event that I did, so I'll kind of just quickly recap on them. The first event that I did, where I went Steel Song Lanterns, I ended up getting 6th place out of the whole thing, and they went to a top 4. So, unfortunately, wasn't close.
Closer than me.
The second event, where I ran Emerald Amethyst, I ended up getting 5th place, and I just missed the top 4 cut. That one we had a melee issue, which we'll get into later. Melee. Nothing wrong with melee. Melee's perfect.
Shaking my fist.
So the third event, I ran Ruby Amethyst. Mm-hmm. I ended up making it to the top 8 cut. Mm-hmm. I played after 5 rounds. I placed 3rd place after 5 rounds, which I was really proud of. And then I unfortunately lost in the first round of the top 8 because my mulligans games 2 and 3 decided to be really, really, really bad.
Yeah, it was a bad weekend all around for mulligans this past weekend. Gotta love when you put back 3 unankables and a random card you don't need, and you end up drawing 4 unankables back.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how my game 2 went. Like, so in the top 8, I won game 1 pretty quickly. My deck just did exactly what I needed to do. I was going against Emerald Steel, had to be quick before my hand got discarded. So I was able to get that out there and really pumping. Game 2, I started the hand with 3 inkables and 4 uninkables. Mm-hmm. So I threw back my 4 uninkables. I kept my 3 inkables. And I ended up drawing 3 uninkables and 1 inkable. So my mulligans were really bad that game. And I couldn't get anywhere. Game 3, it got close. I was starting to stabilize, but when I needed a top deck be prepared, I couldn't get it.
Yeah, plus your opponent's deck was a really fast Emerald Steel deck. I played him in Swiss, and I won 1 game because I was on the play, and I managed to get my ideal curve. Every other game after that, he hated my hand so fast.
Yeah.
He had a lot of discard. Like, his discard package was good.
Yes, definitely. So it was definitely a tough matchup, and unfortunately, just my deck couldn't get there. The fourth event that we did, that's where we went to Fort Wayne. That was the one we drove out the farthest for. I ended up, after 5 rounds, getting 9th place, just missing out of top 8. That was a bit more frustrating because that's where I felt like I saw more of the angle shooting happen, which is nothing against the LGS. The LGS was actually really cool. The staff there, awesome. Like the places that we went to for our championships, the staff was awesome.
Yeah.
Super great, super solid. Most of the people that we met, like the other competitors and everything, were really nice. There were just certain ones that, especially the last 2 events that we did, where there was just a little bit of toxicity.
Yeah.
And a little bit of angle shooting that was a bit too much for my taste. But I mean, you can't control that. That's not on the LGS. That's not on the staff or anything. You can't control that.
Unfortunately, in TCGs, I've noticed people like that just turn out at the competitive events, and it can't be avoided. It's part of the community. Unfortunately, we can encourage people to be decent human beings, but there are always going to be folks that are just taking it extremely seriously and will try to find any advantage.
Yeah. I know at the one in Elkhart, the third one, we definitely had a couple there that were a little, in those terms, sweaty.
And by a couple, he doesn't mean like a paired couple. He means several.
Yes, like a few people.
Sorry, I felt the need to clarify.
Yeah, probably a good idea. 'Cause I realized when I said it, it probably sounded bad.
There are a lot of couples I've noticed that play Lorcana together, which is pretty awesome.
Really
Either
cool.
You'll hear the girlfriend got the boyfriend into it, or
vice versa,
or the whomever. But in one case, the wife got the other wife into it, I think. But anyway, it's really nice to see this bringing couples out and see people playing together. But that's not what we were talking about.
Right. So the fourth one, as I said, I got 9th place out of 5 rounds. So I just missed that top 8 in Fort Wayne, which I was a little bit more frustrated. I won't lie, I got frustrated on that last round that I played just because it was just a rough matchup. And even our friends who kind of came with us, because we have a little group of us that go together on these things, even one of our friends was just like, that's rough. I watched that whole thing. That's rough.
So I thought you bubbled out, but it turns out that you just got knocked out because the top 8 all intentionally drew?
So in that one, the top 4 that was already there that were undefeated, they were able to ID, intentionally draw. They were able to do that for 2 rounds straight. So they didn't need to worry about playing their last 2 rounds. Unfortunately, I was in a position where in round 5 I was 3-1. My opponent was also 3-1. But our tiebreakers unfortunately didn't match up to where we could have intentionally drawn without one of us being put out. Which in that case, it would have been my opponent that would have been taken out, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Because my tiebreakers were slightly better.
So the tiebreakers are based on your wins or your losses?
It's based on your opponent's wins and losses.
Okay.
Depending on how your opponent does and who you face, is where it matters. It gets very complicated. You want to put the math meme about right here when we start talking about it a little bit.
Yeah, I have given up on trying to figure out pairings, which gets me into trouble when Melee does its Melee thing.
Yeah, but that was kind of my experience for it. I know for you, you judged one of them.
Yeah, I judged. That was a good experience. And it was very much a learning experience, kind of a trial by fire, because I've judged for League, and I had judged a case tournament before, but I've never judged at a competitive level. So this was my first time really judging at a competitive rules enforcement level, competitive REL. And it is really a completely different world as a judge, because not only do you have to pay attention to everything, but you also have to make sure that you're giving the correct penalties for misplays.
Yeah, one thing that we kind of saw going, like at all of the events, I'll say, is a lot of people taking shortcuts to doing certain things, like maybe not exerting their ink, or doing things like that, or maybe they had an Ursula Deceiver of All out, and they just go, okay, Ursula sings Friends on the Other Side, I'm going to draw 4. Not really going first cast and second cast. Things like that, which normally a lot of people, I know for me, it's fine, I can keep track, but because of how the game is, it should be played correctly. I will say that. So people should be exerting their ink. They should be doing that. That's something that I think honestly is an advantage to angle shooters. If they really want to get people, they could just simply call a judge and be like, they're not exerting their ink. I don't know what they're doing.
And that is technically failure to maintain game state.
Yes.
It would be an ink error in that case, I believe. I'm not sure, and we're getting new play correction guides, so don't hate on me in the comments. We're supposed to get them next week ahead of Chicago.
Atlanta.
Cities. Anyway, I had to make a PSA going into round 2 at my tournament, asking people to exert their ink, unexert their ink, and keep track of their lore. Because I've noticed sometimes with some players, especially folks that haven't played at the competitive level, if they're against someone that's writing down their lore totals, they'll just let them track everything. And each player is responsible for tracking their own lore.
Yes.
You want to make sure you're doing that. I highly recommend using a pad and paper so that if a game has to be rewound by the judge for whatever reason, you have a clear lore total history to compare to your opponents.
I will say in Magic, as a judge, it's the same thing. Everyone has to keep track of their life totals. And if you have one person that isn't and the other person that is, and they call a judge saying, oh, I was at 15 life, not 13. And then for me, if they're just using like a spin down dice to do theirs, they're not writing it down. When another person is writing it down, I'm going to go with the person writing it down.
Yeah.
Because I can see where they're tracking it.
Yes.
That's why I was writing down my lore counts.
So current version of the tournament rules allows you to use the app, a spin down, the lore wheel, whatever you want to do to track your lore. I highly, highly, highly recommend writing it down.
Yeah, writing it down, preferably pen and paper. People use boogie boards, which is fine, but those can be easily erased. That's why I usually just stick with pen and paper. I have a little notepad with me, my pen with me, and I just go with there. Another thing that I notice people doing in a lot of tournaments, especially the one that you judge, is slow play.
Slow play is really hard as a judge because everybody has a different play style, different play rate, and like for me, I was waiting for players to call a judge for slow play, and I probably shouldn't have.
I was about to.
But there are players who will sit there with 2 ink and 3 cards in hand. They're all 5 cost. I'm looking over their shoulder. I know what's in their hand. And they're just not playing anything. They're shuffling their cards like they've got to play, or they're trying to figure something out. And I get it. Sometimes you're trying to think ahead, do the statistics for your deck. But definitely keep an eye on things like that. You don't want to run into time issues.
Yeah, here's the best way. One of our friends put it. You have 50 minutes to play a total of 2 to 3 games. And while that seems like plenty of time to do so, it's not in all cases, depending on the kind of decks people are playing and all of that. I went through 4 straight events, including a league event, where I went in, my round 1 ended in a draw, because except for the last event, because that was just the deck, the 2 different types of decks we were playing against each other. It was a long game, just how that goes. But my first 3 events, I was a victim of slow play, because people just taking way too long. They know the cards in their deck. They know the cards and how the deck works and how everything does. They know what this game is. They were just intentionally being slow. And when we're in a competitive field, that is something, and I know I need to be better on calling people out on, and not being in a mean way, just explaining to them like, look, we only have a limited time to play these games. Can we please speed this up a little bit? And if they have a problem with it, then that's when you call a judge. Like for me, I should have called a judge on mine just because it was, it was just ridiculous. And yeah, we've had a lot of discussions.
We have. And I will say, a judge isn't going to see everything. Please, if you notice something or if you have a question, don't be afraid to raise your hand and yell judge. We're allowed to give time extensions if we have to because of straightening out play issues. Even if it may not be a play error, if you need judge clarification on something, please call us. Like I said, we can't see everything, and it's hard for us to judge every game's pace.
And I will say it's very hard for a judge to call out things like slow play, just to kind of give out, just because like you were saying, how you were seeing people's hands where they had 2 ink, they're all 5 drop in their hand and they're kind of shuffling, taking their time. It's kind of hard for you to call that out because you might be giving something away.
Yes.
Usually my rule of thumb is I give people roughly 20 to 30 seconds. I kind of count it out in my head a little bit while I'm watching a game. If they go past that, that's when I'm going to say something. There are some situations where I kind of am lenient with that. Like if it's towards like the end of a game and you're trying to do the math out going, okay, I can understand a few extra seconds for that, but I sometimes have to do that myself.
Yeah.
Because it's just kind of decks that I play. But most of the time, I'm able to make a decision. In this game, it's not like Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! And stuff like that. You can kind of... You make your own decisions on your turn. Like, once it's not your turn, you're doing nothing.
Yeah.
You're waiting till your next turn.
And a lot of times, as they're playing their turn, you're figuring out how you're going to answer it on yours.
Yeah.
Like... So, you mentioned something that kind of brings me to our next point. You mentioned giving opponents information.
Yes. So
another issue we ran into in the set championships was outside interference. That's another one that's hard to call sometimes just because it's a more social environment. You do get folks that want to talk to their friends during play, things like that. But in the comprehensive rules, in the tournament rules, rather, it does say that spectators are supposed to be silent.
Yes. And
not interfere in matches. And that means not asking your opponents or your friends or whatever how many copies of a card they're playing while they're playing. It means that you aren't going, oh, hey, that's a good hand. It means that as a player, you're not taking your hand and going, hey, look at this. Isn't this great? To your friends who are standing by. You've got to, when you're playing, your game is kind of like it's in a bubble. The only 2 people that should be interacting are you and your opponent.
Or if you need a judge.
If you are watching a match as a spectator and you see a misplay or a rules violation, you are allowed to raise your hand and call for a judge. Just say, can we pause play? I'm calling a judge. And that's when the judge will intervene. Yeah.
I think what we saw a lot of for our tournament experiences is we saw people in their own community, their own LGS community, and kind of just playing it from there.
Yeah.
We ran into that a lot.
Yeah.
Just because it's a little bit harder. Like, there are people like you. I know you are a very big stickler on the rules.
Yeah.
You are a very big stickler on that. We saw that when you were judging the event, and I know everyone thought you did a great job. I know that.
I'm sorry. If you give me rules, I will try my best to follow the rules as written. It's how my brain works. If you give me lines to color in, I'm going to color inside them.
It's just, I think people were just a little too relaxed and not, some people didn't take it the same severity as others did. I think that's the big thing.
Part of the reason for that, I think, is because it is that transitional event from casual play to competitive play, and people aren't used to thinking of Lorcana in competitive terms yet.
Yeah.
Everybody's used to their league environments where you're just coming in, you're hanging out, you're having fun, you're playing some games. And that gets back to it being something the community is just going to have to adjust to. They're just going to have to get used to sometimes stepping up and playing at that different level.
Yep. And it's going to take a bit. I know right now the community is divided a bit because we haven't covered this yet.
Yeah.
Right now the community is currently divided with how the set championships were done. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of people that were like, yep, that's how it was. That's how it was. People coming from out of town playing in set championships. Then you have people that were very upset about that.
I noticed that there are a lot of people and who basically think that the set championships should all be run on the same day, so local game stores are only getting their usual crowd. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to the way we've all been playing for the last 3 sets in a league environment where, this is going to sound very boomer of me, everyone gets a participation trophy.
Yeah.
Everybody gets their league promos, and then the top players get an additional thing, maybe the spin down counter, the puppy sleeves, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But everybody was getting a crack at the league pins and the promos, and a lot of shops I know are doing raffles for, like, they'll do a random pin and then a pin to the winner, things like that. Plus you get bonus points towards your promos for dressing in costume or helping players, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that coming into a tournament where there's an official prize from Ravensburger that is a promo, people feel like I should be able to get that, and I shouldn't have as much competition, I guess. It's not a great way to put it, but it sort of feels like they felt they were entitled in a way.
Yeah.
To the promo, since it was top 4. And
yeah, people in the community definitely have to understand that when there are competitive events like that, you're going to get people from out of town. They're going to, if they're able to make it, they're going to do it. Everyone running their set championships on the same day, yes, it gives the locals their chance, but you're still going to run into the same issue where people are going to still come in from out of town no matter what. And honestly, it's not good for the community as a whole to run them all at the same time, because people should be allowed to go there. For example, I wanted to go to all 4 of the events that I went to because I really wanted to try to win this promo and playmat, but also at the same time I'm also practicing for Atlanta, and this is a competitive field.
Yeah.
So I needed to be, I needed to do more in the competitive field that way, and these set championships were a perfect way for me to train.
And on top of that, I mean, getting out, seeing other shops, meeting other groups of locals, meeting folks from out of town and out of state, it was really nice to get to know some of the other members of our community. Yeah. And I think that idea, that aspect of coming together at a more competitive event and just being a community of people who really enjoy Lorcana was lost on some people because they got so wrapped up in whether or not they could get the stitch, whether or not they could get the mat.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that's something we'll see improve as time goes on, as people get more comfortable working with the different tiers of play. Like, you have your casual league play, and then you have your championship play, and your challenge play, and your worlds play. And I'm kind of hoping that future events will act more like regional qualifiers in other games. Mm-hmm. Which I think would be a good idea for Ravensburger, just because of the signups issue they had for, especially Atlanta.
Yeah. That
was crazy. But, yeah.
That's about everything.
Melee.
Oh, that's right.
Melee. We should wrap up with Melee. So, Ravensburger mandates that we use a program called Melee for all of our pairings and tournament organization and scorekeeping.
Which, if you are a Magic judge, you know about Melee. Melee's just terrible and horrible. It's awful. It likes to mess up at the very wrong times. And I have my own little rant on that and how people should behave, which we'll get to that in a moment.
So, the tournament I judged, we had an issue where a player dropped early in the tournament. We get to the end, and it decided to give out 2 buys. One to a person who would have made the top cut, and one to the lowest player.
Yeah, it was literally handing someone a free top 4 without them playing when they definitely should be playing.
And I'll admit it was my first time encountering something like this. I had no idea what to do. Fortunately, I had some seasoned tournament players there to help me figure out the pairings. Mm-hmm. But it was through no fault of the scorekeeper. It was through no fault of the TO. It was just Melee doing Melee things.
Yes. Melee needs some work. It needs to be more functional. It needs to be a little bit more easier.
It needs a player controller app, not just a browser-based thing.
Yes. Another thing is people. Here's part of my rant here. You need to be patient. There was an incident I'm not going to say which event we went to because I'm not going to call people out like that. I'm not going to do that. But there was a issue that we had where Melee was being stupid with trying to do the cut to top 8. Mm-hmm. And there were people thinking they know better and giving the tournament organizer a very, very hard time when they were trying to figure it out. That doesn't help. That doesn't help when you're over their shoulder going, no, you should be doing it this way. This is how it's done this way. This is how it's done in other places. This is how we don't care. I'm going to tell you right now, we don't care. As a judge, we don't care. You need to be patient with the tournament organizer. Let them figure it out. Let them figure the top 8 stuff out because it's going to get figured out. Melee is a crap program. It is not a good tournament organization app or any of that nature. It does not function well. And that is on Melee. That is not on anybody else.
One problem we ran into at one tournament, the rounds, for whatever reason, it would not let us end Swiss until the timer ran out.
Yeah.
Which was problematic because people really wanted to get to their, the top cut, which I get. It was getting late. People were hungry. They wanted to do the thing. But you can't tell Melee you can't force it.
Yeah.
And the other thing we ran into is if you set up Melee certain ways, it won't let you do a top cut.
Yeah.
It won't properly pair your top cut. So, yeah. Melee is not forgiving. Melee is very buggy. And I am really hoping that Ravensburger puts out their own tournament organization software soon because I am going to scream and cry if I have to do a tournament. I am so dreading the day I have to judge a tournament where I'm also the scorekeeper.
Yeah. It's going to be fun.
Because as long as I have a scorekeeper, I'm good.
Yeah.
I can do the rules, I can do the play correction, but don't ask me to do Melee. Please. Please.
But yeah, I think that's a good spot to end it.
Yeah, we'll end that. Don't use Melee. Thank you for joining us on the TCG Rundown. I'm Silver.
I'm Andrew.
Drop us a like and a comment. Subscribe if you liked what you saw. And check out our sibling channels. Board Games Rundown, Miniatures Rundown, and RPG Rundown. See you next time.
See ya.